All the rolling go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today we are in Brownwood, Texas, which is the very heart of Texas, or so they claim, the very center. And it's a nice town. We've been here for a couple days, and there's actually quite a bit here. And it's an older town with a lot of neat older buildings and some really cool mansions. But anyway, today we are at the Martin and Frances Lehnis Railroad Museum, and we are here with Crystal, who is going to take us around and show us what she's got. This museum, from the pictures I saw on the web page, looks extremely interesting.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you taking your time this morning, Crystal.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at your museum and learn a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure. So first off, let me just give you a little bit of background how the museum came about. In September, we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary.
Okay.
So we're still relatively new, but the collections have been on display longer than that. So Mr. Lehnis, who the museum is named for, actually worked on the railroad just a few months shy of 50 years. And yeah,
wow.
yes, yeah, quite an impeccable career. So he started to notice that, especially in the 60s, the railroad wasn't like keeping stuff anymore. They weren't doing passenger service, and eventually there was no passenger service. The government took over and it became Amtrak.
Right.
So when Santa Fe started kind of dissolving their passenger service, they would literally just chunk stuff out. Yeah, so Mr. Lehnis would pick it up, essentially, and take it back to his house. And so he was known, he lived just outside of Brownwood and Early, out towards Zephyr, and his property, he had both our train cars out there.
Really?
The Pullman car was his, and the caboose, as well as the yellow building, which is the Crest Depot. That was all out on his property. He had his own narrow gauge, which is a mini train. We have our layout outside. He had his own layout. He would give rides, and he would take all the stuff that he collected that he picked up out of these like trash piles, and he would put it in the cars and the building, and he had his own little museum set up on his property. In the 80s, he gave an interview saying that was his goal, is to set up a museum.
Okay.
So in 2000, I think he was approached by a family friend and someone who was passionate about what he had started with his collections, and asked, what did he plan to do with it? He and his wife, Frances, only had one son, one child, and he had married, but he passed away unexpectedly, early on. I think he was like 40. And so in 2000, they were in their late 80s, and nobody really knew what was going to happen with all this stuff. So he was approached about what would you think about doing with your stuff? Would you want to display it and make it a museum? And so the City of Brownwood actually started looking into different ways to make that happen. And at the time, TXDOT had this transportation grant, and it was to restore old depots or create transportation museums.
Oh, that's cool.
And so they applied and were able to actually get the grant to build this museum. So that's why it looks a little bit more modern. What's great about the location is this was the spot for the Continental Grain Company, and this is where it was even when the train started feeding in. And up until a few years ago, the tracks still fed into the silos.
Really?
Yes. So it is really kind of a neat thing. So the metal that you'll see on the walls in the back, you see like it spells out grain. And then this other wall in the center, it actually, the word is split on either side of the wall, but it spells out Continental. That was salvaged from the building that was here. And even when I was a kid, this big metal building was just here. It hadn't been used in a long time. And so the city purchased this property, took down the metal building, and so the slab is almost original. There were some things added, like we have a viewing platform off the back and some other areas, but most of the slab is original to what was used for the Continental Grain Company.
That was convenient.
Yes, it was just a big rectangular building, so it worked out.
And the cement looks so cool. You've got it stained and polished.
Stained it, yes.
It is a really nice looking floor.
So that started in 2000, and they had to go through the collections. They didn't do a groundbreaking until 2005.
Okay.
Yeah, so it took a few years to get things going. And the museum didn't open until 2007. And unfortunately, Mr. and Miss Lehnis, they passed away. Miss Lehnis died, I want to say, 2 or 3 months before the groundbreaking, and Mr. Lehnis was very ill the day of, so he sent some family members and then passed away like a month later.
Oh, geez.
So they never got to see any of this like truly happen. They were a big part of it in the initial planning and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't get to see it come about. So you'll
Thank
see.
goodness for hoarders.
Yes, it's terrible, but when people ask me like, oh, well, how much of this was Mr. Lehnis's stuff? About 95% of everything we have on display was Mr. Lehnis's. He truly had enough to make a museum, and we do have like an archives area, so it's not even everything.
Wow.
And then Mr. Lehnis got into collecting as well, and I started collecting the railroad china, which is very rare and important to have as well. So I'll take you guys back there to see some of the china. Now what you will see is I've got these 2 lawnmowers in here.
These lawnmowers don't really fit, but
No,
they look
no.
like they're pretty high performance lawnmowers.
Yes, they are. They're racing lawnmowers.
They got wheelie bars on the back. These things must do
get
wheel
up to
stands.
100 and something miles an hour. They're souped up. But the reason why they're in here is because Saturday we had a big event. It's called Wheels That Move the World. We've been doing it for, I want to say 7 years now, give or take. And it was started before I came on as the director. But we coordinate with the city, like streets, utilities, landfill, all those where they have the big equipment. And then we work with the health department, comes out and does some things. And we get a bounce house, and we had a small artisan market out front. And the local rail line, TXR, they parked 2 of their engines out on the tracks behind us.
Okay.
The red and gray, yes.
Yeah.
And then we have some local businesses that bring in stuff like RV sales. We had a classic car show.
Okay.
And we kind of just take over this entire space. We used to do it in that lot. It was an RV lot, catty corner to us, but it's being renovated as part of the event center. It's going to be like an outdoor park for concerts and stuff.
Oh, cool.
So I had to rethink some things, but yes, that's why we have lawnmowers. That's not something we typically have on exhibit, but yes, Mr. Lehnis was kind of a hoarder. I like to call it Hoarders Buried Alive Railroad Edition.
There you go.
So,
and you know, there's a lot of places like that, and like you were saying, I think a lot of mines and railroad companies and a lot of those things, when they started closing down, they did just scrap everything.
yeah, literally just piles of stuff. Like I have a collection of the California poppy print Santa Fe dishes, but it's not the dishes, it's only the lids to the sugar bowls.
Oh no.
And I'm talking hundreds of them, but they all the bowls broke, but they picked up all the lids. So I have all these teeny tiny lids, you know, about the size of $50 with this beautiful print on them, but I can't display them because they don't, you know.
Don't have them.
Yes. So what we have over here is
I was going to say, let's start taking a look at some
yeah.
of your museum here and some of the collection.
Yeah, so this is some of the little things that Mr. Lehnis collected.
And is this a picture of him?
Yes, this is a picture of him and Francis in front of their narrow gauge, the 687, which we had restored, and it's on display in the museum. And
Does it still run?
It does. It's a live steam, and they actually used it for a little while, until they bought their own, and then that's when they had it restored early on.
Wow.
But yeah, live steam works on coal and water, and you'd have to fire it up. But he would fire it up. I have an interview where he would say he'd get it fired up, and kids from all over the block would come and want to ride his train, and he would give rides. So
how cool
yes,
to have a guy like that in your neighborhood.
Yes.
Well, and just as a kid, I would have been totally fascinated to be able to walk through. I love wrecking yards and
yes.
stuff anyway. And to be able to walk through and see all the artifacts and the collection.
Yeah.
And I mean, every time you open up a door, it's something else.
I met someone that said they owned his property for a little while, and that they would go out there and they were still finding like railroad stuff out there, like I guess it had gotten buried or
wow.
It was just missed. So yeah, he had a lot of stuff. So he was known for his pipe. You'll see in the picture, he always had a pipe in his mouth. So we found some Sir Walter Riley. We're guessing that was his choice. But yeah, these are all little things. I mean, he literally collected everything. Of course, with a 50-year career, he has a lot of safety awards as well.
Right.
So he was a welder. He did, him and his crew did a lot of the welding on the track. So, and I'll show you.
Was he an engineer also, or
no.
he just worked on his maintenance?
He was a track welder. They laid track.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Now, when we were first talking, you said that you have the caboose and the passenger car
yes.
out front. And as we walked past those on our way in,
yeah.
they're very nicely restored. I'm sure that they probably didn't look like that when you guys got them.
No.
But very nice looking cars, and people can go in and take a look at the way those are set up.
Yes, so they've had a little bit of work done on them. They need some more work. We're actually working on a few grants to help do some restoration on the caboose and on the old Crest Depot from Crest, Texas. But they are in decent working conditions. When we're open, like we are right now, we open up the cars so that people can go in one end on either end and go through both cars.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so you kind of get to see a little bit.
These are what, 1940 vintage cars, do you know?
Yeah. So I believe the caboose is a 1932, and the Pullman is a 1927. The Pullman car is really interesting. Only 18 of that style were made, and we have one of them.
Really?
Yes.
And I was only off by about 12 years.
Yeah,
or
so
14
not too bad.
years.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
And so as we come in, you've got an old train light, you've got a Santa Fe insignia that I'm sure goes on the front of a train, you've got some hitches.
That would be on a depot.
Oh, on the depot?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And you've got some old hitches that looks like they went on the car.
Those are couplers, yes.
And those were, you had a guy that worked between the trains that ran that shaft down around the coupler, correct?
So they don't use that kind anymore because they were very dangerous. People would lose their hands and stuff. So they still use the type that is like on the end of the caboose,
Right.
where they go together like that.
When you
and they
smash
lock
the
it.
trains
Mm.
together. But these ones
Yeah.
here, that somebody
They
had to
used to-
stand between the trains
put the pin.
and drop the pin down. I have never seen one of those latches.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really cool
Yeah.
to see. I was making assumptions when I was trying to describe it. It's got like a great big chain link that's probably 12 inches long, all open in the center, and there's a big drift pin that's probably an inch round and a foot and a half long, with a handle on top that you drop down in between that chain link in order to hook those trains
and
together.
they're called Lincoln pin couplers.
Lincoln pin couplers.
Yeah, like because
okay.
it has a link and then the pin.
Okay.
Yeah, and
not
that-
Lincoln, link and pin.
Yeah, sorry,
okay.
that accent.
Nope, that's
and then
all
the
good.
other ones I believe are called knuckle busters because they would and then lock together.
When you hear the trains going.
Yeah. So if you look behind you, there's a video, and it I don't know if this one shows. Part of this video shows him like recording them laying out track and welding and testing out the different sections of the track. So these are his actual home videos he took while working on the railroad.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of.
And again, you have a big mural down here that kind of gives the story with.
Martin and Francis.
There you go, Martin and Francis. Same picture as what was on
Yeah,
the
so
other
I
deal.
just blew it up to,
Right.
made it bigger to.
And that's really cool.
Yeah, and then of course he was a welder, so he wore his hat and goggles a lot. We're lucky to have his hat and goggles.
I was going to say the hat looks like it's been on a few welding trips.
Just a few. Yeah. So.
And then you have a couple of dock carts.
Yeah, so so wagons were used a lot, especially in the beginning of railroads. They would pull them up to actually bring the goods into smaller towns. And then, yes, we have the ones that you would pull up to get the baggage off the cars as well. And then we do have some traveling trunks. I have one on display by my office. You'll get to see the inside, where it's basically like a wardrobe on wheels. It has like the hangers, and it has all the little drawers you can use, stuff like that. So, travel by train was a big deal, and it was luxurious for a while, and trunks kind of show that.
Those old steamer trunks are so cool. Like
Yes.
you said, you open them up, you stand them up on end instead of laying them flat, and
Yeah.
open them up, and they've got places to hang your clothes
And like a
and
shoe
drawers.
box and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
And these carts that we were talking about, these carts are up pretty high. They're probably up 3.5, maybe about the height of a
Yeah.
counter. But I'm sure that the reason that they were up so high is trains sit up so high. And
Yeah,
in order to
they
load
would-
into the train, you would have to have something that was up that high.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that by the pictures. Like they would literally like stand in the train, put it on the wagon. So yes, they are very tall, not ADA compliant whatsoever.
Actually, I don't think thered be a lot on a train that would be ADA
No, there's not.
compliant.
Like our
Even today.
our two cars aren't either. I feel terrible about that. So this is our kind of like REA setup here.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit. Are you real familiar with the Railway Express Agency? This is REA, Railway Express
Yeah.
Agency, not Rural Electric Association.
Right.
Because that's an easy one to get mixed up with.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about the Railway Express Agency, because I've got a Railway Express Agency truck that I'm in the process of restoring.
Oh, like the little toy one or the
No,
big one? You
I've
have
got
big
a
one.
1940
Oh,
Railway Express
wow,
Agency truck. I'll have to
wow.
show you a picture when we're through with the podcast. But and so I've been studying Railway Express Agency a little bit. But when I bring this up to people, even though it went into 1975, I think was when it was finally disbanded, there are not many people that realize what Railway Express Agency was. So,
Right.
tell us a story.
Okay, so the easiest way to explain them is they're like UPS. So they would get the packages from the trains and deliver them in town. And they did that from 1918 to 1975, but it made getting packages faster. So I'm pretty sure UPS is kind of mimicked off off their services a little bit. It's just the packages come in by air more instead of rail.
Well, actually, Railway Express Agency turned into Air Express.
Yeah, they did
And
turn
so
into Air Express.
They
for a
did
while.
go into the air aspect also. Some other things just to kind of bring up. Railway Express Agency, when it started, was brought in by, I think it was 26 different railroads that all agreed to run this system. And so they all came into agreement, and it would be the 4 railroads that are on your monopoly board along with a whole bunch of others.
Yes.
And they would transport items, anything. I mean, I've
Yeah,
read
no,
stories
absolutely
about
everything.
them. They would do giraffes and elephants and cars and
Yep.
trucks and anything you could imagine. Railway
Anything
Express
that could
Agency.
come in by train, they could deliver.
I think they also did all of the old Sears stuff with the houses, and Sears used to sell houses out of their catalogs.
Yes, they did.
And they would ship them through Railway Express. It was a monopoly.
Yes, it
And
was.
they controlled the movement of packages and transport
Yeah.
for a long period of time.
No, absolutely.
Like prior to UPS.
Yes.
And like she said, it would come into the rail station,
They'd
and
unload
then
it.
they would unload it and put it onto trucks and deliver it around town, just
Yep.
like UPS. Or people could come to the station. I've heard that a lot of people would come to the station also
Yeah.
to pick up their packages.
Yeah.
And it's their symbol or insignia is a red diamond that says Railway Express Agency on it. And then, like I said, we've seen planes and stuff in other museums
Yes.
that are
Yes,
Air
they did-
Express.
They did become Air Express, but in the 70s, they, because of UPS and the U.S. Postal Service, they sold their rights because the government.
That was part of it.
Yes.
There was a lot of mismanagement.
Oh
from
no,
what
absolutely. And by the late 20s, there were 86 different railroads involved with it, so that gets kind of complicated too.
I think there was some CEO
Yes.
mismanagement and thievery and some other things that really plagued the agency.
Yes.
If anybody's interested, there's a really cool book, and I think there's only one book that I've been able to find written on the Railway Express Agency, and it's called 10 Turtles to Tucumcari. And if you're interested in the history of Railway Express, that'd be a place to get some of it.
So we do have all, well, except for the Z or T, which are, but we have G, H, O, N, O, and S model trains.
Okay, she's talking about the width of the rails and the scale.
Yes, so there's a gauge and there's a scale. There are two different things. If you're a true model railroader, you do not use them interchangeably.
Okay. I'm not true, so I
gauge,
don't know.
Gauge is the track. And,
How wide the track is?
and then scale is are the cars and the trains.
Oh,
so
okay.
you would say HO gauge means something different than HO scale.
Okay.
So they're talking about the gauge of the track, or they're talking about the scale of the train.
Okay, and that would transfer over into real life too, because you
Yes.
had narrow gauge and standard gauge, and
Yes.
I don't
so
know all the
gauge
terms there.
Gauge is always the track. It's the
Okay.
width from the inside to the inside.
Okay.
That's what that means. So, but what also reflects back into real life is the gauge and the scale are both done based on the big one.
Okay.
So it's so many times
smaller
than an actual one. So they have percentages and stuff that they do. So like even the people, the buildings, they're all to scale.
Okay, and you've got how many different sets?
This is
One,
G, that's S, O, N, and HO.
Okay, and all of these are complete towns with rail cars. And now, do you run these during the day usually? Or?
Yeah, when we have visitors in, we'll run them.
And
But
kids
they're
are
very-
always absolutely fascinated with the trains as they're moving around all the different tracks. And
Yes, so we're actually working, so the S gauge, there's a gentleman in town, he has been working on that since the museum opened. He changes things out regularly. He's added buttons, so he's rewiring some things right now. But so we are working to add some buttons and interactive pieces to some of the other layouts as well.
That is so cool. And then you have little view bubbles for kids.
Yes,
that is
they
so
can
cool.
get up underneath there.
You crawl
and
underneath
watch.
the desk, and then you pop up inside, and
Yep.
it's got a plastic bubble that's about 2 foot in diameter,
Yeah.
and sticks up about probably 1.5 feet.
Yeah.
And you can put a kid in there and have them look around.
Yeah, we'll have some kids, they'll get in there, they'll wait for it to come around the curve, and then they'll pop out real fast and then come watch it come down to the other end. I'm like, please don't hurt yourself.
That is so cool. Okay, and then you've got a conductor's uniform.
Yep.
And a whole bunch of receipts.
Yeah, that's a conductor's case, so it would have like the tickets and different things he would need.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
cool. Some fuses. Now, are those flares?
A fusee. So yes. So it would be a railroad torpedo, and that's what this case is. And it would come with these packets. They say explosive on them, of red flag, and then the fusees. So they would put these explosive packets on the track. So if another train ran over them, it would make a loud sound. So they would know that something happened ahead of them. Like there's an accident or they're stuck on the track or something. And then they would have a flagman waving the red flag to give other trains enough notice so they don't crash into the back of them.
This was kind of a Casey Jones OSHA requirement.
And so, and then, these are basically, the fusees are like flares. So the little nail end stabs in the ground, and then they could set a fire, so it'll also help alert them. So this was kind of like a little safety pack for them, and it would be on the caboose.
That is cool.
Yeah, it is. I did have to bring in the fire marshal to make sure we were okay displaying that, because there was a railroad museum up north that I guess, I don't know how it happened, but one actually did like combust.
Really?
Yeah, but my fire marshal said that was okay to have like that, so.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad the fire marshal.
So.
And then you've got a bunch of wrenches and different tools that they would have been using for the.
Those guys actually laid track by hand. So, nowadays they lay track. They have giant machinery that just lays it and does. I mean, now someone has to work the machinery, but they can get track laid much quicker.
I think they can pick the track up and put ties and stuff underneath them. I've seen some of that as I've been driving down the road. That it's quite a deal with the machinery.
Yeah.
And then you have a couple of steamer trunks on
this is the one I was telling you about. It actually has like the hangers and all the different trunks in it.
And they're called steamer trunks, but they went on trains also.
Yeah, that's why they were called steamer trunks.
Oh, I thought they were steamboats.
Well, because steam engines
Steam
too.
engines
yeah,
too,
steam
yes,
engine, a
definitely.
locomotive or a boat.
Yeah, I've always just associated them with boats for some reason, even though I know people carried them. Okay.
Yeah.
And these displays?
So this is just part of some of the. Oh my gosh, the word is escaping me.
The Hopi.
Yeah,
Cachinas.
it's the Hopi Indians, but this is what inspired some of the Santa Fe designs.
Oh.
So these were actual decorations that were in some of the passenger cars on the
really?
Santa Fe Railway. Yeah, they had like, and then for Fred Harvey, Mary Coulter designed this china specifically, and it was also kind of off the Hopi Indian. So a lot of the Santa Fe stuff is Hopi Indian inspired.
Okay, and Fred Harvey.
Fred Harvey started the Harvey House. So a lot of people know about the Harvey Girls. There was a movie with Julie Garland and Angela Lansbury.
Now, did they have a Harvey House here?
Yes, so across the street is the original depot. It opened in like 1904, 1905. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But like we got the railroad in 1885, and then the depot opened shortly after. It was originally an eatery, not a Harvey house, but later on, because of like the war and how many people were coming through Brownwood, it was turned into a Harvey house. And it actually was that in the 20s, and it closed because there wasn't a lot of traffic in town. And then we got Camp Bowie, and we went from like 20,000 people to 150,000 people overnight because of Camp Bowie. Okay. So they reopened the Harvey house, and then whenever Camp Bowie closed right after the war, they closed the Harvey house again. So now it serves as the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
So.
And Fred Harvey, just from the little bit of knowledge that I've gained, which isn't a whole lot, he had several houses or restaurant, motel setups, but he would always hire single women.
Yes.
A lot of them came from Kansas and that area, from what I understand, but he kind of brought a lot of single women into areas where there were a bigger male population. But
not necessarily.
Okay.
No. So what it was is he hired women from the local area when the Harvey house would open. They had to sign a contract for 6 months, and they had to be single, and they could not fraternize with the railroad men. Although many of them ended up marrying railroad men because that's who they were interacting with when they served people. But basically, it was you could get a hot meal with excellent service on real china between one train to the next.
Okay.
Meaning, like, you could get off the train and then go in and get fine dining and then get on your next train. And they would, so what would happen is they would walk down the cars and say, you know, this is the meal today, who plans on eating? And then they would send out a message saying, okay, you need to prepare for 20 meals. And so they would set all the tables, and then when you come in, you would set your cup a certain way, like, I want milk or I want tea, and they would know what that meant, and they could instantly get everybody serviced so they could have a nice meal and then get back on the train.
Cool.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily he'd put them where there were a lot of men, it was just where there were a lot of stops along the way.
Okay.
So, but a lot of them, they were young, they were single. Women at that time weren't really allowed to work. So it was really, he revolutionized a lot of things. He provided work for women when they weren't really allowed to work outside of maybe saloons.
Right.
And then also revolutionized what fast food could look like.
That is cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Neat part of history.
It is. I'm glad we get to have some of that in Brownwood. So.
Yes.
These are just some timetables and some of the important pieces that were used to keep the train on time, needless to say.
And you've got an Oklahoma Jim Crow law
Yes,
bulletin.
this bulletin board was Mr. Lehnis's. He had it in the Crest Depot outside. But I didn't want people trying to pick the stuff off when they came to visit. So that's why we have it in here. But yes, that is an original Jim Crow law from Oklahoma.
That's interesting.
That tells you like how much he was like keeping, all the way down to paperwork like that. Right. So
then you've got some signals.
Yeah, so these are some signal light pieces. These here are the pieces, that came out of the signal lights we have on display outside. Okay,
now these are, we're looking at a box that's probably 8 by 10 or 6 by 10 that has 3 little lights on top, a red one in the middle, a green one on the right, and a yellow one on the left, and it's some sort of a switch.
So these are actually lenses. These aren't lights. They would have a clear bulb inside, and depending upon what light was needed, what was triggered, the lens would come in. That's why they're kind of cone shaped. Okay. So that it would reflect out more. So those are just lenses.
And these are for stop, go, and be careful?
Yes, more or less. So
not go faster. Yellow means go faster on the road.
Yeah. Well, actually, funny enough, what we use as signal lights when we drive are the railroad established that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so our driving signal lights mean the same thing as the railroad.
I guess that makes sense because the railroad was
Came
running
first.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
And of course we have some lanterns, some different types of signal lights. Before they went automated like this with semaphores and things, they would actually have to use lanterns, hand lanterns.
Very
So
nice collection of lanterns.
It all worked the same way. You know, red means stop, green means go. But on top of the different lights, they also had different gestures. So before colored bulbs, they would have white bulbs, and so they would have to do, you know, swing a certain way and things like that. So kind of a...
And you've got all the different hand motions as far as you raise your hand for
Yes.
go, release brakes. You swing it back and forth for do not go, apply brakes. Looks like you do a centrifugal all the way around for the train has departed.
Yeah, just a big circle with your hands
that's
around
cool.
and around. Yep.
And just real quick, on the back side, because we were walking down this set of displays, you've got a mountain scene.
So actually, this is a really neat and interesting thing. I mean, I think everything is, but this is extra special. This is a more recent thing. So this is our in-scale layout. It's not just a mountain scene, it's a Civil War reenactment.
Oh, it is.
So-
and when she says N scale, she's talking
It's the smallest
The
we can.
smallest. The tracks are only a ½ inch wide apart, and the tall trains are only maybe 1.5 inches tall. And so all these Civil War reenactors are all only a
And there's
½ inch
Lincoln.
tall, maybe.
There's Lincoln back there by the tent.
Okay. yeah, you couldn't tell that unless you had a telescope. on
Yeah. So what makes this interesting is the director for the oh my goodness, I've lost the words. It's in Frisco. It's a big railroad museum. They have mostly rolling stock there. He contacted me. He had come through for a visit with his son like right before COVID, and they may not be on.
They are.
Oh yeah.
And they light up and
Yeah, it's in the different areas. Like they'll turn on, like you're by the blacksmith, so that's what that is.
oh, we're hearing the
But-
blacksmith's hammer.
Yeah, that's what you're
Okay.
hearing. So he really liked how we were doing our layouts, and they didn't have a need for this. Museum of the American Railroad, that's what it's called. And so they asked if we wanted that, and I'd been wanting to redo the in-scale we had. We were having trouble with it. And so me and another staff member, we drove to Frisco with a U-Haul and brought this back, and we've been rewiring it, and we added higher walls to it so people couldn't.
That is unbelievable
Yeah.
that they did not want that. That is such a fascinating
Well,
piece, but
they
there's
have-
only, what, 1 million pieces in it?
Yes, so they have, most of their stuff is rolling stock, like cars
Right.
and engines. But they have a small area that they call Traintopia, and it's almost exclusively G-scale and mostly donated by the one guy who did this one as well. And they decided to, that it didn't fit the aesthetic they had going on.
It sure
And so-
fits nice here.
Yes, it fits well here, so I was excited to have it, and it's been nice to play with and get it, you know, working for us. We had to make some changes to it.
That is so cool.
So this is just a very small portion of our railroad china. This is the stuff, most of it that Miss Lehnis collected, and we have had a few other pieces come in, but most of it came from her. And it's from all over. It's from a lot of different rail lines. And I
Really
don't-
pretty table settings.
Yes, and a lot of it, it's, well, the silver in there is real silver, so every once in a while I have to take it out and I have to polish it once it starts getting kind of
Tarnished.
tarnished. So, but I mean, look how cheap it was to have a meal. I mean, you could have a whole meal for a couple bucks.
Yeah, you could have a salad with lettuce, pineapple chunks, and cottage cheese for 60 cents. A chef's combination for 60 cents. Chicken for $1.10. vanilla ice cream. Now that's my kind of meal there. 35 cents, and if you wanted it with cookies, it was only 45 cents.
You could have a whole pot of coffee for 35 cents.
A whole pot.
A whole pot.
That way there you wouldn't miss anything on your train ride.
Yes. But if you were seated with several people, you could order a whole pot and it was 35 cents. So yeah, they would do the whole course. You could do salad, sandwich, dessert, all that kind of stuff. So it was just really interesting. You could do shrimp cocktail for $1.10.
It's amazing.
Yes.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
But these prices were also the 1920s, 30s, 40s?
Yeah.
And they weren't making that much a day either.
No, they weren't. It was definitely, you had to have the extra money to do that. So.
And then you've got a really nice display here on the Harvey girls. I guess I should have waited till we got around to here.
That's okay. Yeah, so these are actually some interviews that were done for some of the Harvey girls. So it's kind of nice to see from their perspective.
Okay. Now, we were at a rail museum in Albuquerque. They were just showing the museum there, or the place, and they had a full-scale setup of the hotel and everything that the Harvey girls had worked at.
Sure.
So, yes, very interesting.
Thank you.
And then you have another cart.
Yes, we have another cart. I think this one was donated. Yeah, this one was donated, not by Mr. Lehnis.
Okay.
So, and then on this back side is, it talks about the impact railroads had on wartime, including Camp Bowie. All the supplies to build Camp Bowie came in by rail.
Okay.
And soldiers, the POWs, all that.
Okay, the POWs.
Yeah, we had German POWs here at Camp Bowie.
You know what's really interesting is that's a piece of history I had heard nothing about until probably 7-8 years ago. And in doing this podcast, we've been to probably 10 museums that had German and Italian POWs.
Yes.
They were all over the place, and that history is pretty much just buried.
Yes, so actually the German POWs, they were treated so well. They were treated better than they were by their own people here. A lot of them didn't want to go home when the war was over. There's lots of stories of that. They helped with some civil projects. There was a mural that was painted out at Camp Bowie in the officer quarters. And a few years after I started here, I was able to help preserve it and take it to the Brown County Museum of History. So they actually have it on display over at the Brown County Museum.
That is cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. It was like a contest, and one of the soldiers drew it, and then they had the German soldiers paint it.
Okay.
So kind of neat. Yeah, because you can tell when you look at the soldiers, a lot of them are wearing more of a German-style uniform and not an American-style uniform. So.
Okay, now we see Miss Casey Jones here, and also Molly Pitcher. Did they must have used women on the railroad during World War II?
They did, yeah.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, so when the men went off to war, the women did all the jobs, including the railroad.
Wow.
So a lot of women were upset when men came back. They were just given their jobs, and so they had been doing these hard labor jobs, showing they could do it, and they were expected to go home. And
we just did a podcast up at the WASP Museum in Sweetwater, and same type of thing. You know, the women are out flying the planes, and then as soon as the war effort's done, go home and fly your Piper Cub. And it's amazing the way that women were given all this responsibility and training and everything else, and then weren't used afterwards. Not even weren't even allowed to carry on with their profession.
Right. Yeah. So this was neat to find in Mr. Lehnis's collection. This was the dedication for Santa Fe workers here in Brownwood that were killed in action during World War II.
Oh.
So I actually found their photos, and then we found this when we were relocating some of the collections. It was kind of neat to have this.
This is really a neat display.
Thank you.
You've got a poster here that says, "Tanks don't fight in factories, keep them rolling. The railroads are the first line of defense." You've got your dedication here to the railroad men that lost their lives in World War II. You've got some other posters, "Millions of troops are on the move. Is your trip necessary?" Pictures of war supplies being unloaded from trains. Just lots of really neat pictures here.
Yeah, this is actually pictures of the stuff coming into Camp Bowie.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And then you got a Navy uniform.
Yeah, this is actually the uniform of a brother of a woman who worked here for a while. She just retired last year, and so she let us keep it on display. But he served during World War II, so we wanted to keep it up.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we've pretty much walked around most of the museum and have seen everything. I know you're on a time restraint, but I really, really appreciate you taking your time this morning talking to me. I know it was short notice, but
okay.
it worked out well.
Yes, sir.
You guys have a website.
Yes.
And it's a good website. I have checked it out. Tell us what it is.
It's brownwoodtexas.gov/228/Lehnis Railroad Museum.
Okay, the easy way to find it is Railroad Museum in Brownwood, Texas.
Yes, if you Google it, you'll find Railroad Museum or Lehnis Railroad Museum. You can search that too.
And there's some really neat things here. She's got displays that I haven't seen at any other museum as far as the Railway Express Agency, very little information on that. Same thing with the Harvey girls, a nice display there, and all of your model railroads are so much fun to watch.
Thank you.
And I think kids will have fun with that. And you also have a little science in motion area for kids.
Yeah, it's kind of to explain how gravity works and keeping the trains on the track. You know, when you think about cars staying on the road, you know, you think about traction and stuff, but trains, the track is like angled and all sorts of things.
Okay. Do you run your steam train?
Our mini train runs on Saturdays, and during the summer we do Friday and Saturday, and then special occasions for like field trips and stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I always finish out my podcast by saying the world is full of wonder. People need to get out and explore. Come see some of this stuff. Yeah. There is so much history here and so much to learn. And everybody have an absolutely wonder-filled day.
All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?